better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice.
Rob, what do you know about the multiverse?
I know that what we know about the multiverse is vanishingly little, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, the robot had his theories, but we're diving into the deep end here, just getting introduced to it through Mordenkainen Presents the Multiverse at the Multiverse of Madness, at the Mountains
of the
of
multiverse
Madness of the
madness.
Multiverse.
No, multiverses are they're so hot right now. It's everything everywhere all at once, and the new Doctor Strange, and big news, multiverses. Everyone loves a alternate reality. I mean, everyone hates an alternate reality. It's horrifying when you think about it, but that's the only way the math works, folks. You got to get used to it. String theory.
Sure.
It's the only way the math works.
Sure. String theory proves that in another reality, like the Japanese Empire and the Nazis are planning on nuking each other. I got
That's
it.
right.
Yeah, it's fine. Okay.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
An alternate reality. And like the Man in the High Castle, we are reviewing a book that was written by the I Ching.
That's right. That's right. This book
Oracle
was assembled entirely by divination. The designers at Wizards tossed their sticks and read the signs and then designed this book as a consequence. Yeah.
Do you believe, and this is to explain our joke away so it's no longer funny, do you believe that Philip K. Dick wrote The Man in the High Castle using the Oracle? I mean, that's what he said many times.
I 100% believe that Philip K. Dick did that. If there's one man like fucked up out of his mind on drugs and also just regular name brand psychosis, it's Philip K. Dick. I mean, here's the thing. He said he used it to like make like plot decisions. I don't think he like consulted the I Ching for every single page, but like
grammar. Yeah.
It is kind of like the book itself does not. It's good, but it's not comprehensible in the same way that like your standard science fiction fantasy book is. And that is just kind of how Philip K. Dick writes. But here's the thing. I believe him. I believe him when he says that.
Okay. Well, do you believe Wizards when they say that now they have a bundle along with Multiverse of Madness, Tasha's Guide to Everything, and Xanathar's Guide to whatever, everything too. I noticed at my friendly local gaming store / coffee shop, they were all bound in a nice white leather case and on sale for a retail price of $149.99 USD. So another nice 3-book set to complement your original trilogy. So we've got sequels now.
Yeah. Do I believe Wizards? They said a lot of things about this book, and we'll get into the details later. In my opinion, many of those things were exaggerations at best. Things like this book will be useful for both new players and veterans alike, and things like it contains substantial updates to X whatever. So I don't know.
Yeah, Rob and I were like, are we going to have enough to talk about? I mean, we always have enough to talk about.
We've literally never had that problem, but
our thesis is not a lot of changes here.
Yeah, so let's get the like big picture out of the way. If you're listening and you want to know, should I buy this book? I think we can answer that pretty quickly. So,
right. It's a simple if-then statement. Do you own Volo's and Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes? If you do, don't buy this book.
Don't buy this book. Basically, yeah. I want.
If you don't, it's a lot of monsters.
There's a lot of monsters. I mean, I feel kind of bad because it's sort of like technically what I want, and I like that everything is in one place, and they've got a couple of useful, like organizing appendices that didn't exist before, but that's not really a good enough argument for this book. If you don't own both of those books, or especially if you don't own either of them, then this is a good purchase. There's
absolutely.
a lot of monsters here.
Yeah.
They're all in one place. The updates to the we'll get into the details, but they have made updates to sort of like the balancing and to certain creature abilities and also to how the stat blocks are organized that I think are generally an improvement. Unfortunately, I don't think that it's enough to justify essentially buying this list of monsters a second time, which is kind of what I was hoping for. It would have been possible, Matt, you can tell me if this is correct, but I think that there is a version of this where even if I already own a book that has these monsters in it, that I would buy it and feel like it was worth my time and money. But the updates were not really substantive. They were really, it was more like a patch. It was really like a very, very slight balance, pass on existing.
It was a patch that they didn't even write a YouTube trailer for. It was just notes released. That's how minor it was.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be a hypocrite here because I kind of gripe about these parts, but even there's barely any lore or flavor text or anything. There's interjections from Mordenkainen and Tasha, and they're bad. They're frankly the lowest effort.
They're always bad. We've complained about this since the beginning.
Yeah, but these are the worst. They're not even groan worthy. At this point I long for Xanathar's cringe worthy interjections, because these are just I don't know, they foisted this off on some intern who had to write a sentence that sounded vaguely plausible coming from Mordenkainen and Natasha, and they're all just what? Why do I need to know this? What's going on here? So
yeah, so it's just okay. I think if you looked for a review of this or something like that, you might have. There's been a lot of talk about this because they announced these changes to, we're going to simplify monster stats, we're going to remove some things, we're going to add other things, we're going to change how spellcasting works. It seems like all that was a lot of too much ado about nothing. For me as a dungeon master, here's my reviews. I don't really give a shit. It's not a good opinion for a reviewer to have, right? Because it's incredibly uninteresting. But the monsters that have big spell lists now have simplified spell lists and simple attacks. That is the one change that stuck out to me. And honestly, I could go either way. I don't really care. It's not going to affect my games that much.
I think part of this is because you and I are particularly veteran DMs, and I run many creatures straight from the book, but also if I don't like it, I'll just change it. I do it all the time. I did it with the old monsters. I'll do it with the new monsters. Anytime I have a spellcaster, this is my own thing, by the way. It's I like the spellcasting changes, but anytime I have a creature that needs to do spellcasting, I usually change the spell list anyway. I usually build that on my own with a specific intent for that spellcaster to do something in combat or before combat. So it doesn't really impact me all that dramatically that they changed the spells that certain, if I look at the, an abjurer wizard and I'm well, his spells suck now, I'm just going to give him different spells. I'm not going to run exactly what's in the book and be oh gosh, he sucks because he doesn't have counterspell. No, I'm going to give him counterspell. I don't know. I agree with Matt that I don't care. I don't have any strong opinions about the changes. What I was hoping for that they did a little of, that I wish they'd done more of, is make the stat blocks simpler and easier to read. I do appreciate the way that they are organized now, which we'll talk about, but they could have done a lot more. I was expecting a much more substantial pass at the way that these blocks are formatted and designed. This is barely anything. So if you were worried about that, good news. You had nothing to worry about. If you were hoping for substantive changes to make these substantively easier to use, well, you're probably going to be disappointed.
Maybe we got poisoned, or if you want to look at it in a more positive way, inoculated by reading the preview.
Yeah.
With James over at MCDM of the Flea Mortals, where monsters did get a big substantive change, which is monsters having special actions that are kind of cool and exciting. And, most of these monsters, they didn't go through every monster and like add big things. I mean, there might be one or two here or there, but no. It's not, and maybe I was like wishing for, they're gonna reprint all the extra monsters, and they're all gonna have like a new ability that makes them more interesting to run. That's not the case.
Yeah, and they didn't even. I mean, there's nothing I'm specifically missing, but they didn't even reprint every monster. I was hoping for every monster. There's still some missing, not like many, but it's still like, if you're going to go through the trouble of doing this,
right,
leave. I don't know.
To their credit, it's not just Volos and Mordenkainens. There are a couple in here from some of the other adventures, but like Rob said, it's not, there are still a couple that are missing. I think there were a couple like Eberron monsters I noticed that were not in there. And speaking of other things that are missing, like there's a lot of races at the beginning, or, as we like to call them, species. There's like, 30 new species, something like that. I'm not going to count. But again,
Something
it's
like
not
that.
everything, right? It's not, we're still missing a couple, mostly Eberron ones. The Changeling made it in there, and the Shifter, but not the Warforged for some reason.
Yeah, that's weird. I don't know how they decided this. They also didn't include some things from some of the magic supplements, but they did include some other things from some of the magic supplements. Here's the thing. They did bring in some stuff from more minor sources, which you might not have any access to, or haven't been printed anywhere else. Like there's the turtle is in here, which is great. Very happy that they included the turtle in an official book, but I don't know how I don't know. Here's the thing. This was $30 to buy on D&D Beyond. I feel like it should have been $20, but I really feel like it should have been free or like $10, but since it's mostly a reprint, I don't know. Part of my complaint is mostly just that they're charging people for it. The changes are good, but they're just not substantial. And basically it's just saving you the trouble of having to gather information from a bunch of different places.
So, I mean, I bought it on D&D Beyond. I own Volos and Mordenkainens in hardcover.
Same.
So I guess for me, there's some utility now that I have them both. I feel like I, like Rob, should just get it for free on D&D Beyond, like I get everything. But man, it is nice to have everything there. So I guess long story short of our overall assessment is, if you don't own both Volos and Mordenkainens, damn, there's a lot of monsters here. That's super useful. This is basically a monster manual too. You can't go wrong as a dungeon master having a lot more monsters. So that's great, right?
Yeah, this is great for. I will say that this is great for players who are newer to the hobby or just starting out. It means that you can have this is so many more monsters than the monster manual has. And yeah, it'll give you a much stronger start. So that's great. And I have complained repeatedly about the barrier to entry, and this technically lowers it. So I am for that. A+.
Yeah. And
but
I mean,
like most of our listeners, you're a veteran and you own a lot own a lot of books. Save your $30 and spend it on Flea Mortals instead. You'll get a lot more monsters out of that and a lot more utility.
Yeah, I guess that's it. I mean, it's like it is kind of nice that there's a package deal that if you want all of the like options supplements, right? The second half of just the good stuff, you can shell out $150 and get the 2-player supplements and now a supplemental monster manual. So like that makes sense. I mean, like it just does suck that there's not a lot extra here for people who already own the other ones, and that's fine. I feel like when we originally reviewed Volo's Guide to Monsters and Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. We talked about how they definitely are shorter books than the core books, and the first half of them or first third of them is taken up by like lore and background and like things like that. Sometimes about player races and cultures, sometimes about monsters, and then the second 2/3 is just a monster manual. I mean, this one is all just a monster manual. So if you didn't like the kind of lore of Mordenkainen's and Volos, then, this is the book for you.
Yeah.
So should we get into the sections? Should we talk about...
Let's talk about what's actually in here.
Right.
Which is a lot, but also isn't. But there's...
Yeah. There's no front matter, and there's fantastical races is the first section, which is 30 of... previously published species, some of them like in Wild Beyond the Witchlight. Others are just from Volos and Mordenkainen's. And there are new standard rules for creating your character that apply to these species only, rules as written.
Yeah, so I guess in that sense, this is good. I feel weird continuing to use this caveat because I don't know that all that many people play this way, but if your DM insists on rules as written, or you're playing in organized play, then this book is very useful to you because it allows you to just have one book with all of these species in them to choose from using the new rules, the new ability score rules that are much better and involve much less race science.
Which we should point out are, I think, a little different than some of the previous books, which some said increase one score by 2 and increase a different score by 1, but they've added or increased 3 different scores by 1. That wasn't in all of them, but it was in some of them.
I mean, and this is... Again, to be clear, and we've talked about this change several times, but this is good, and I approve. But I feel like most players who want to play this way are already doing so, and don't need this book or permission to do so. But it is good that now this is sort of solidified for all of these species as the way to choose ability scores. There are some notable missing species and subraces. Tiefling subraces aren't here. The Owlin aren't here, which is from Strixhaven.
I don't think any of the Magic the Gathering races like Luxodon or Veldekin made it in. I think one of the bigger changes before we pick a couple races to look at in particular.
Wait, hang on. Wasn't Minotaur from the Greek one?
Maybe, but is Minotaur... Oh, yeah. No, maybe it was. Yeah, so maybe Minotaurs made it in. Excuse me. One major difference is that when a species is presented in any of the other supplements, you get about a page or a half a page write-up about like what this species is like, usually with like 3 headings, like Goliaths are stalwart defenders and athletic prowess, and then there's like a paragraph or 2 about this. All of that is cut for these species. There's usually one paragraph describing the species, and it can be pretty sparse.
And they did this for monsters too. There's very little lore, and it tells you that you need to rely on the monster manual for a lot of that. I am not like super mad about this, but it does feel a little low effort. I would have liked a bit more lore and detail on everything, frankly, but I guess it's already a pretty long book, so I guess I get what they were doing here.
Right. All of the lore sections have been shortened, and there was a lot of discussion before this about like, they're kind of removing for player species ideas that like, here are some creatures that are like always evil, and that has definitely been a change, right? Goblins and like orcs and lizard folk and I think gnolls are like not described as like being filled with like evil. Actually, gnolls didn't make it in here, so scratch that.
Gnolls are in the monster section, so are Gif, by the way. I know that we haven't had officially Gif as a playable race but I want them. Why would you give? Why would you give?
Well, they're saving them for Spelljammer. They've already said.
I know,
they're
but like,
coming out.
come on. I mean, that's the. Sorry, this is an annoying thing, but we're gonna get a Spelljammer book in a few months, and then this is going to be incomplete. And I'm like, just give us the GIF. Give us the GIF. Put Neogi in here. What are you doing? Why are you holding out on us, wizards? Anyway.
Yeah. Like a lot of the species, not all of them, but a lot of them got some big balance changes. So there are like stat changes to the species. Like, for example, Asimar, like got their, celestial revelation reworked to a bonus action. Like in general, races that got reprinted here got some kind of buff to make them work better. Not always, but usually.
And usually small, nothing dramatic that I noticed, or nothing that would make me terribly upset. But they did get a balance pass.
Here's the thing I want to talk about. Let's see. Bugbears, changelings, goblins, and hobgoblins have had text added saying that they are of Fey ancestry. Or have a connection to the Feywild. Yeah, they all have Fey ancestry, which is the standard like elf trait. If you remember from your player's handbook, that means you have advantage against charmed, right? Not very useful, but it's kind of a big lore change that they kind of hinted at. So what do you think about this? Like, for example, I like that goblins are maybe creatures of the Fae. It maybe explains why certain groups of goblins are all about like stealing chickens or something like that.
Right.
Hobgoblins and bugbears, like, for example, as they were presented in lore that has changed constantly over time, and which this is just one more change. For example, hobgoblins were like a martial race about honor and evil, and bugbears were like serial killers.
Right.
So, like, this is a radical change for our Gobbo friends.
This is interesting. I didn't notice this. I thought that the sort of winnowing down of the lore meant that this was intended to be vaguely setting neutral, these species, but one, it didn't work in the first place, and now it especially doesn't seem to make sense. So I'm not really sure. I don't know. It feels like Wizards has been trying to consolidate and make more interchangeable a lot of their different settings and various monsters and species and etc. But in my opinion, doing a poor job of it. And this is just another example of I'm not sure what I'm ambivalent on goblinoids being fey creatures, but I'm not sure what end this accomplishes.
Yeah, it's a little frustrating. Like, for example, in Eberron, which has the best goblinoid lore, goblins are a group of like related species, maybe that have some sort of common magical or evolutionary ancestor that are native to the continent of Korrivar. And they are most definitely not from the Feywild. They are like they are the people indigenous to this continent. And elves have a continent they're indigenous to, and humans have a continent they're indigenous to. And so, yeah, like, I don't know. It doesn't like work for Eberron. It might work for your homebrew. I understand the like using a common language Fey ancestry, but maybe it would. I don't know. Do goblins really need advantage on being charmed? I don't think so.
No. Yeah.
The same was true for changelings. Changelings are described as having a Fey ancestry. Now, I think for non-Eberron games, this works great, right? Because how do you explain the fact that there's changelings, right? You could go with the Eberron explanation, or you could go with the explanation maybe non-D&D heads might associate with the word changeling, right? Like a baby swapped out by the spirits, right?
Right.
So that's kind of cool. But
I'm noticing that they're a lot more generous with changing creature types. You know, changelings are full on. You are a fae, and used to be that mattered a lot. Used to be that really impacted which spells would work on you and so on and so forth. But I suppose it's not really all that substantial or significant in 5th edition.
It matters much less unless you are a construct or an undead, and then you have trouble being cured. So, other things we want to say about the species. I am glad turtles are in there. I am turtles.
Also glad that was basically my big takeaways. I was very happy to see that turtles are included. So, A+. Love turtles.
A+ on that. My big complaint is that the turtle, one of the turtle abilities, which is pull yourself into your shell, was not changed. They changed a couple other things about the turtle, including giving them a more powerful unarmed strike, but their turtle defense, or was it called shell defense, is still written. I'm going to quote here. You can withdraw into your shell as an action. Until you emerge, you gain a +4 to your AC and some other things, right? You're prone, have 0 speed, et cetera, et cetera. I think this was how it was written before in the turtle package, which you had to buy on your own, and is not really that fun to use as a player. I can speak from personal experience, because you have to move and do something and then be like, all right, I'm drawing into my shell. That's my turn. Couldn't anyone look at this and be like, this might be better as a reaction where you're giving up something else in the future to be like, oh, I'm back in my shell. And it's just here's the thing. So maybe Rob and I can never be pleased. If there's a lot of lore about something, we get mad that it's made it really hard for this to be setting neutral. Turtles can't be X or Y in my setting. But, when you get this book with very little about lore, nothing about turtles. Right. What does it mean to be a turtle?
What's a turtle?
Yes. They live on many worlds, and they journey, and they have a connection to the natural world. Okay. So it is. So maybe this should make you happy, Rob.
Sorry. Give me a second before we go on.
Okay. Yeah.
Second sentence here. Turtles don't have a unified story of how they were created, but they all have a sense of being mystically connected to the natural world. That is some
lorem ipsum.
Yeah, that is exactly what it is. It is just some placeholder text. Again, don't ask for a lot, but I guess I'm asking for more than this, especially for my beloved turtle. Yeah.
Here's the upside. To look at it a glass half full, if you're a dungeon master who is going to say, I'm going to add a bunch of these species to my homebrew campaign, you have a lot of freedom in that if your player's like, I want to be a turtle. And I read that, all turtles are druids and they all live in polygamous relationships, and they only worship one god, or all the other setting, and most of them are and all of them are evil or whatever, a lot of the baggage that comes with adding more lore to something, then you don't have to worry about that, right? Because this is such a generic placeholder that you get to make up what turtles are in your world. The downside is, you have to do a lot of work, but I don't know. I kind of think of it as a positive.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not going to use whatever they wrote about.
I would prefer this. Truthfully, Matt and I can't be pleased because we gripe whenever the lore is too thorough, because we usually hate it. So I don't know. I guess the answer is don't write lore or write good lore. But yeah,
for example, Goliaths have 2 sentences. Now, Rob and I know lots about Goliaths because we've been reading about them since 3rd 0.5 edition's Races of Stone. What a great supplement that was. And 2nd edition and all these other things. 4th edition and all these other things. If you're So I guess this is great for maybe Rob and I who are dungeon masters and want to make up our own stuff. It's really bad for players, right? If you're a player and you buy this book, there might not be much to inspire you because for each species there is art and there is a paragraph or half a paragraph of description. And the good news is the stats are like usually better. So mechanically you can be more inspired.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it does ask more of the players if they want to do something different. They'd have to be... Well, I guess I'd bring more to the table, I guess, which isn't always bad, but doesn't give you a lot to work with.
The hobgoblin character has an axe, and by an axe, I mean it's a guitar with an axe blade on it, which would definitely fuck up your tuning, but it is some art that I love.
It is pretty cool.
Makes me want to make a bard that also has a axe guitar.
I mean, there's real... This machine literally kills fascists. I'm imagining a folk singer with a axe guitar, axe zitar. Yeah, this art is good.
Yeah,
I guess
this
we should mention
machine
that
kills beholders. Yeah,
most of the art reused. Maybe all of it, most of it.
I noticed new art.
We've gotten used to. But just so you know, if you are expecting new art, in addition to all the other things that we said weren't new, you will again be disappointed.
Well, here's the thing about lore changes, and one last example is that the Kinku lost in their lore, their stuff that they can only mimic what they have heard, their terrible curse. Which, if you remember, Rob, when we first read about that new lore introduction, we kind of hated, and then we came around to liking it, and now it's gone again. And the thing is, like, all of these, the lore of all these species changes basically with every book. So, if you don't like it, pick something from an earlier book, I guess.
Yeah.
Unless you're doing some weird bioessentialism shit, and then don't do that.
I think our take was that it can be annoying, but it's kind of cool. I don't know. It reminds me of, I don't even remember like what edition of like what Star Wars RPG this was, but there was an early one where Wookiees did not get, like, they could not speak English, and so
basic, Rob. They couldn't speak
basic. Sorry, I was like common, basic. It's
no,
common,
basic.
right? No, it's basic.
It's basic.
Anyway, they didn't speak basic, and so your Wookiee players, if they wanted to be, if they wanted to play rules as written, they had to, or somebody in your party had to speak Wookiee and like translate for them. Anyway, this was like a fun thing for Kenku. Fun, I'm quotation marks here. It was really just annoying. The Wookiee thing was annoying. The Kenku thing where they could only mimic was annoying. So generally, I think this is a move in the right direction because it kind of a little bit like the whole like Kender have to steal things. It gave certain players permission to be a real pain in the ass, but also, it was sort of a unique thing that Kenku had, and it is a bit sad that it's gone. Yeah.
Well, a lot of the stuff stripped away. So in, again, the positive sense, these species are now your toy box, your playground. You can add whatever you want to them for your homebrew world, other than goblins, which are all Fae now. So moving on from species.
Yes, let's get into the meat of this book, which is... the Bestiary, of course.
Rob is right. I want to start off by saying the organization is different. First off, we've got some nice tables at the back, and then everything, for the most part, is alphabetical, which is kind of a change. Like before, if you wanted to look up like the hag, I think you had to go to H. Now, if you want an honest hag, you go to A. If you wanted a devil before, regardless of the devil's name, you went to a D. Now you go to what the Maragon stat block.
Yeah, so there are good and bad things about this. If you really want to find the Pit Fiend, then you need to go to P. But if you're like, I'm looking for a demon or a devil, and I can't remember what it's called, Sorry, Pit Fiend's a bad example because it's not in here, but you know what I mean.
I think it's okay because of the nice stat blocks by creature type. For devils and demons, it is a little confusing because they're not separated out.
I actually think the only area where it's really potentially a problem is with devils and demons because they have such weird names that you're not going to quite remember what each of them is. But then exactly, you might not remember what a Narzugon is. But like Matt said, there's these tables in the back. So you could be like, well, I'm looking for a demon. And you can just go to the stat blocks by creature type and go to, well, you get a fiend, but whatever. And find that, or stat blocks by challenge rating or by environment, which are great. These are all good things. These are fine organizing principles.
Yeah. And the other thing I saw was the change in alignments, which has been slowly kind of shifting over time. It's just a common language. Like now the words they'll use are unaligned, typically neutral, typically chaotic evil. And then I think only for like named creatures, which, are the demon and devil lords, does it just say lawful evil. So just a bit of standardization on how they're listing things. That's a little different. Are there any favorite monsters of yours that you want to talk about?
Well, Matt, how could I let this whole book go without talking about the Dolphin Delighter?
Oh, the Dolphin Delighter. Is this about that weird guy who had an experiment, or guy and gal who had that weird experiment where they flooded their house and jacked off a dolphin or whatever?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. No. I'm talking about, of course, the Fey Dolphin Delighter that brightens the moods of those who travel the seas of the domains of delight. I am highlighting this creature because I think this is the only new monster that appears in the Multiverse of Madness, the Monsters of the Multiverse. If you're a dolphin fan and you wished that there was a Fey version of your favorite sea rapist, then this book is for you.
We do love our dolphins. I guess it's the one new monster. It is weird that there is just one.
Just one, right?
I mean, Wizards cannot win here, and we shouldn't let them win. If they added 20 new monsters, people would rightly complain that you have to buy a whole book to just get these 20 monsters if you own the other ones. And now that there's no new monsters, we will complain that there are no new monsters.
Yeah, no, they can't win, and they shouldn't. They don't deserve to win. They haven't earned that. I mean, there are a lot of my favorite monsters are in this book, and like I said, it's nice to have them all in one place, and so I will probably get some use out of this eventually. The flail snail is in here, which is one of my very favorite creatures, and though they this doesn't really matter. You used to be able to chop off the flail parts of the flail snail and use them, to as weapons, but you can still use the shell as to make like anti-magic armor, which is cool. And also I love the flail snail, so I'm not griping too much, but
yeah. There is I guess there have been some hit point changes, and okay, I already talked about the alignment thing, but
we should talk about the spellcasting in specific.
Let's talk about spellcasting
because
let's be as specific as possible. Let me pick a specific monster.
Yeah.
Let me try and pick the most egregious example, and then maybe we can pick a smaller one. Let's see, the Drow matron mother, or Dro matron mother is I think CR20 or something like that. A creature meant to be, this is the person in charge of an evil drow empire, right? A drow house or whatever.
Right.
And incredibly powerful, right? So, 250-ish hit points, etc., etc. I looked at the Drow Mother's entry before, and they had 9 levels of spells, and they had 20 some odd spells. And now they have some bonus actions, and this is typical. Most spellcasters will get a couple at-will spells, a couple 3-a-day or 2-a-day spells, and a couple once-a-day spells. So, I mean, that's the difference, right? Yeah, I don't see any other, she doesn't have 9th level spells anymore.
Yeah. Well, let me give another specific example. It's not egregious, but it is, I don't know, a humanoid stat block. Let's take a look at the Abjurer Wizard. So, the Abjurer Wizard, who, let's see, can cast Wall of Force, right? So can cast up to Globe of Invulnerability, which means that they're at minimum an 11th level spellcaster, right? They now have multi-attack and can do 3 arcane burst attacks, which are just like a +8 to hit, 3d10 +4 force damage. Matt, can your 11th level wizard do 3 arcane burst attacks that do 3d10 damage?
No, it can't. And I mean, just to correct you on a minor point here, in Volos, the Abjurer Wizard could cast up to 7th level spells. So they could cast Symbol, Teleport, Globe of Invulnerability, and now their highest level spell is, as you point out rightly, I guess you didn't get anything wrong, a 5th level spell, Wall of Force.
That's what I thought, is that the old version used to be able to cast much higher level spells, right? So this is
and the new version has more hit points too. So
it has more hit points, and the spellcasting is much simplified. I don't know that in this particular case this is an improvement. So here's the thing. Many creatures and many enemies had limited spellcasting, and having that take up a bunch of space in their stat blocks, I think, was detrimental. Where this change, I think, really does not benefit the DM is creatures or foes that are specifically spellcasters. Because if I were just going to pick up this Abjurer Wizard and run it, it would be far inferior to the old version of the Abjurer Wizard, which, yes, you're right. Well, you didn't say this, but I hear your objections. Harder to run absolutely requires more prep. But that being said, this is not really like a wizard. This is just a
blaster.
A blaster, exactly.
A gun.
It's just it's right. It's a gun. And this is another thing, and this is a minor complaint, because I think that most DMs, myself included, don't do this all that often, but there's really no discussion or consideration of out of combat spellcasting. What a spellcaster might cast ahead of time in terms of either like buffs or environmental spells or contingencies or whatever. Now, like I said, I don't use this very often, but when I have a very significant spellcasting foe, I do use it, and I like to think I use it to great effect. I also think that it's very, very important to sort of the overall verisimilitude of the game and to balancing your overall campaign and encounters, to consider what especially spellcasters might come to the encounter having cast upon themselves. And so this is I think a loss, not an insurmountable one. You can just adjust the stat block in the spell list yourself, but
I think what might have worked better or might have been a happy medium is a standardization to creatures that say spell casting, right? And okay, so players have told you, dungeon masters have told you, Wizards of the Coast through your feedback, that they hate having a 9-level spell list of spells to keep track of for the monsters. Fine, right? I think I kind of like here's the at will, and here's the 2-a-day, 1-a-day, and then, but just say like something like that. This creature can cast up to X level spells. So for the Drow Matron Mother, up to 9th level spells. For the Abjurer Wizard, up to 7th level spells. And then if you're like, this NPC needs an interesting spell, they might have prepared symbol in their, thing. Or this Abjurer Wizard is someone who can teleport us, which might be useful for the plot, right? I will say, like, for basically combat things, right? Here's a great example. The Drow Matron Mother can cast Gate on her spell list, or that's given on her typical spell list in the original Mordenkainen's. In the new one, the Matron Mother gets Summon Servant 1 a day. The Drow magically summons a demon. It gives you 2 examples, right? So, like, that is definitely easier to do for the Dungeon Master. You don't have to remember what Gate does. That is the normal combat effect you're going to use for Gate, right? Yeah. But it definitely takes away the fact that, like, gosh, if we could get some blackmail on the leader of this Drow city, we can have her gate us to, Acheron, where we need to go. Now, again, like Rob said, there's nothing stopping you as a dungeon master from being like, here are the spells the spellcaster has, right? Rob says he does it all the time. You can do it all the time. And I think at the end of the day, I'm back to my original thesis about this book, which is I just don't give a shit, right? Because if there's a spellcaster, I'm going to write down the spells I want them to have.
My only concern, I guess, is that new DMs or first-time DMs are gonna run these stat blocks as written, and I don't know, be a little poorer for it. But in the end, it's not a big deal. It's minor, and nothing is stopping you from being creative in other ways and doing exactly what Matt and I do, and just changing it once you're comfortable doing so. So
yeah, I think the only people who will be poorer for it are literally the dumbest DMs on earth, which is a lot of us, and which we all are at the beginning of the game. Like, if you're unfamiliar with Dungeons & Dragons, like some of my students who have started DMing, right? They might not realize, like, hey, these stats are like yours to play with, right? You want to have that wizard, the players meet in a tower, have the ability to cast teleport circles so that, they can teleport the players somewhere else if they bring them 5 Knowles ears or whatever, quest you gave your players that's kind of stupid because you're raised on video games. That's fine. But they might not realize it right away. However, they will realize it eventually. I can't imagine anyone not.
And that's the thing. Well, one, D&D should be accessible to everyone, including stupid people like us. Even an idiot should be able to run a D&D game. And I think for the most part, they can. This just
Rob
means
and I prove this every day.
Every day. And the thing is that so the thing is that they clearly Wizards was trying to make this easier to run and to read, and they just kind of split the difference. They didn't go too far enough, Matt. They tried, but ultimately it's just kind of a wash,
Right, you still have to look up spells, right?
Yeah.
Is the crazy thing to run most of these, like the Abjurer Wizard, Globe of Invulnerability, Invisibility, Lightning Bolt, right? These are all spells that have very specific rules that, like, there is something to be said for everything the monster can do is right there on its stat block. But again, we're not there. We did just split the difference.
Yeah. Which isn't a big deal. It just didn't really accomplish what I think Wizards was theoretically trying to do. It doesn't really make it a lot easier to run these monsters. It makes it a little easier, and it kind of makes them not as good, but not significantly worse. So yeah, I guess we're back to I don't give a shit.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, I think our not giving a shit powers has, helped us reach a new stage of understanding.
Have we achieved synthesis, Matt?
I have an idea is what I'm saying.
Okay.
I have maybe something useful to contribute. If I was doing this, right? Okay. Here's the problem. Spellcasters are hard to run. You have to look up spells in the middle of doing other things. That sucks. especially if you're not very familiar with the spells. Even if you are, it still sucks. So you put everything on the character or on the monster sheet. They did that halfway with the wizards and other spellcasting creatures having attacks. But what they should have done is added a page or two to the index called spellcasting for monsters or something like that. And when it writes the spellcasting entry, it says the abjurer can cast spells, usually favoring the abjuration school. Give them a sentence of the flavor of the spells. Their DC is X. The maximum level spell they can have prepared is level 7. And then give the players like some kind of neat little table where they can either roll or look up quickly, like what are 3 spells this abjurer has prepared today, or something like that. I realize this would be much longer now that I'm saying it than a page or two because there's just so many fucking spells.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's what I would like. And then, okay, you've achieved the thing of you don't need to look up the spells, but to run the character, you give them maybe some other cool abilities that are non-spells that are kind of listed in the character sheet, but then give them a way to like, hey, go add some spells to this if you want to take the extra time. But if you don't, you can run our Abjurer, which has Arcane Burst, Force Blast, Invisible Barrier, and like a couple other like cool combat abilities without having to go to the spellcasting page at all. I think that would be interesting.
I agree. And yeah, I just think that the way that this is not all that helpful. We should mention the other big change. There were some formatting changes. They now sort actions like by action economy. So you've got
this is incredibly useful. Yes.
This is actually a good change. I sort of wish that they had done. I wish they had just like gone back to like the straight up like drawing board and come up with a whole, because like I'm used to looking at these stat blocks. I've looked at them my whole fucking life. They have changed very little since second edition. You know, the same information is there. And I'm sure that somebody who's a smarter and better designer than me could come up with some ways to present this information that is easier for newcomers. And I think a big problem with D&D that I'm discovering is that everybody who's involved with it, with making it, is an old timer. And we all, like Matt, we've talked about this. Every time I try to teach this game to new players, regardless of where they come from, the things that I think are just totally like banal, straightforward, are completely arcane to them. And I guess I'm just like kind of rambling now, but the point is I liked this change to action economy. This helped make sense of it. I have a feeling that you could go through and totally redo the whole stat block and make it much more streamlined and comprehensible. And I wish that had been what this was rather than just sort of like a cosmetic light update.
Yeah, like, do we need the ability scores of monsters or just their modifiers?
Yes, exactly.
You know, it's that kind of thing. I will say, except for maybe 4th edition, the 5th edition stat blocks are much better than monsters in 2nd edition or 3rd edition.
Yes, they are an improvement.
At the same time, to take the MCDM critique of this, so many of these are still claw and bite attack plus 1 supernatural power and a bag of hit points. And if you go back to like original edition or like 1st edition, you could often describe a monster with like 3 numbers, right? You know, it's AC, it's hit points, and it's like to hit damage, right? And that certainly takes up much less room, right? That's a sentence or 1 line on a text. And a lot of monsters like, okay, I'm still in the D's here. The Dragoloth, a demon, right? It has a bite and 2 claw attacks, a bunch of hit points, an armor class, like, and then everything else is like an edge case, right? Do you really care that its stealth is 3 higher on its bonus than its dexterity modifier? Or do you even really care what its stealth is at all? And that it has the following spells: darkness, confusion, and fairy fire. Like, this whole one could be a sentence, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I know that I know how we feel about this, but at this point, I'm starting to understand the Pathfinder 2nd edition attachment to keywords and tags and things, because frankly, it makes more sense than this hodgepodge that 5th edition is, or that Wizards, that regular D&D is still attached to. The longer that it persists without like a top-down redesign, the clunkier it feels to me.
Yeah, I think, gosh, if a monster is like as uncomplicated as the Dragoloth, like what are we really gaining from having to look at a whole page of things, right? I love monsters that have lots of cool and special abilities and legendary actions. We just had like, a whole episode where we gushed about that for an hour. But
Yes.
if the monster is simple, it should maybe be as short as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I don't know. I don't actually think there's all that much else to say about Monsters of the Multiverse. We gave you our review at the beginning. If you do not already own the books we mentioned, it is absolutely worth it, despite the time we spent talking about how much we didn't like it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can skip this one, and you can feel very comfortable skipping it. You're not going to get any FOMO from not buying this book.
Yeah. Here's the deal: is like I, despite the fact that there is a more limited lore about these monsters, I think every monster, including some of the kind of NPC humanoid monsters I saw, had art. Maybe there's a couple, like an ogre bolt launcher doesn't have art, but like there is I think all we want from a monster is like, hey, is there some cool art and some things that can inspire us to how we can use it in a story or to challenge our players? And, this book, especially if you don't own the ones that published all the things that came out before, has that. And if this was, Rob, all 100% brand new monsters to you and me, right? Or at least brand new to this edition, I think both of us would be gushing. And for some people out there, that is the case because they don't own every single adventure and Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes and Volo's Guide to Monster. And so this is going to be great for those people. And if Wizards decides next year to publish Tasha's Guide to the Multiverse, in which there is another like 200 monsters in a book for $50, you and I will absolutely buy it and like it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, that's it. That's Monsters of the Multiverse.
And to close, as always, I'm just making up a new thing that have like a closing. As always, Rob will have to answer an embarrassing question. Rob, in your opinion, what is the most cringe D&D themed tattoo a person could have?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Is it?
No, actually it is, because my mind is whirring. I think the most
wait, you don't have a D&D tattoo, right?
I don't have a D&D tattoo.
Clear.
I have other cringe tattoos, but none that are D&D related.
Well, what is your cringiest tattoo? That way no one can get mad at you if you say
really
that their
cringe,
tattoo is
but
cringe.
I do have a Jolly Roger tattooed on my shoulder, which I love,
yeah.
but it's pretty it's pretty basic. It cost me $50.
Yeah.
I got it done in 30 minutes. I have no regrets. But if you wanted to own me for my tattoo having, you could own me for that. If you got a tattoo of Drizzt, that would be pretty cringy.
Right.
Oh no, sorry. The cringiest thing would be the Wizards of the Coast logo. That would be
the D&D ampersand. The
yes.
little
yes.
that's a dragon.
Yes.
Yeah, that would probably be the worst. Yeah.
That would be super cringy. Well, I'm going to say something that's going to get canceled. I'm sorry. I actually think.
Sorry, I mean my tattoo, which is a picture of a 3D photorealistic tattoo of Keith Baker's face and his cool hat.
My we might have to remove this because people are going to get mad. I think that any like Critical Role themed tattoo is pretty cringe. I have to be honest about this. Please don't get mad at me, but you know, that would be pretty cringy. But if you got like I don't know, just like a D20 or like a set of dice or something, that's a little cringy, but also it's kind of cute. I don't know. I wouldn't judge somebody who had like a nat 20 somewhere on their body.
No, I think you can't go wrong with the geometric dice.
Yeah.
If someone is being weird, you can always be like, I'm just really into platonic solids. Actually,
right.
It's a cool,
yeah,
cool
I
idea.
love,
as long as you don't have a D10
exactly.
tattooed on you. Yeah, I don't think I would get a tattoo of any of the the little, since I was on D&D Beyond, like they kind of have the little class symbols. I think those are like, those look like they were designed by graphic design is my passion. They're like, you know, the Ranger.
Those aren't even like official though, right? Those are.
I mean, I don't know.
Maybe
D&D Beyond is official now. So,
right.
Rob, actually, here's a final thing I had about the book we're actually reviewing is, did you own Volo's or Mordenkainen's on D&D Beyond?
I did, and I get to keep
What
them.
happened? What happened to them?
I still
did
have
they disappear? Okay.
No,
okay.
they did not disappear from my like library. They're just now listed as discontinued. So if you were mad, and maybe you have a right to be, about content being sunsetted, which I'm sort of ambivalent about, if you own Volo's and Mordenkainen's, even if you own them on D&D Beyond, you still have them. They're not taking them away yet. So save your torches and pitchforks for now.
I guess it was like, I mean, so we talked about there is some like problematic stuff. Definitely not the worst stuff Wizards has published for D&D, in the stuff talking about like kind of bioessentialist races, but it's really just it's mostly the stat blocks and a couple of the playable races. But like Mordenkainen's, we talked about this when we reviewed it, right? Chapter 1 on the Blood War. We love that. I don't know, like if you're like, I want to run a Blood War campaign and you haven't bought Mordenkainen's now, I guess you're kind of shit out of luck.
I
was just realizing like there's no way to get that.
I forgot about, there is good stuff in there.
I mean, it's not a lot. It's a very short section, right?
It is, but
you
there
could just
is,
buy the
there is
second
a whole
edition
chapter on monster lore. Beholders, giants, gnolls, goblinoids. Again, I don't care because I own it, but it does suck if that's something that you would want to use and you don't have access to it anymore.
Yeah, it is just kind of weird because I don't know, maybe Wizards in their surveys and feedback said, everyone's like, when we put out a new book for the Dungeon Master, we hate all the lore stuff, just give us monster stat blocks. But and maybe that was my first reaction to when these books came out. I was like, maybe I'd just rather have a monster manual too. But at least in Mordenkainen's, I really liked the chapter on the Blood War, and I thought it was a nice introduction to it for people who are not familiar with Planescape. I didn't think Volo's was as good. I thought the Beholder section was fine. I thought the Hag section was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But like, I didn't like the orc section, and we talked about this in the review. Anyway, so that's gone. Another minor thing. Again, don't really care. We own it already.
Yeah. Mordenkainen's had the Gith section, which I liked. Again, I don't need any of this. But then I don't. It does suck because something is technically being taken away, which didn't really. I'm going to say something that's going to get me in trouble. Didn't really happen in previous editions. I mean, most things for the edition remained somewhat valid. Nothing was.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing could be digitally discontinued, right? So,
but they went out of print, I guess.
Yeah, it's minor, but it's a thing.
like, okay, we have spent like 7 or 8 episodes of the show complaining about some of the like bioessentialism and like weird ways player races and player species are framed in particularly, I think in Volos was maybe the one of the bigger offenders, but I just don't see why, since it's a digital thing, why you wouldn't just rewrite those paragraphs or something like that, because it's not a lot. It's it's really just like the stats. And I guess the other thing I had in my notes that I forgot to get to is like, wouldn't it be nice if this book in the opening section talking about player races did that wonderful paragraph on ability scores and said, this can apply now to every player race, right? I know it said that in like Tasha's or whatever, but I guess it's a little, I don't know.
Yeah.
But just like, also maybe you could, since you're cutting out all the lore and stuff, like why not reprint the player handbook? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, now that's a whole other can of worms.
All right. Well, we should go.
We said we weren't going to talk. We said we weren't sure we were going to have enough to talk about, and now we've gone over again. So thank you all for listening. If you disagree with us or you're mad, definitely if you're mad, please write us at dmofnone@gmail.com. Add us on Twitter at dmofnone. Subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/dungeonmasterofnone. And yeah, as always, thank you for listening. Stay healthy, stay safe, and keep rolling them dice.
Okay, well, what's the cringiest baby name you could give a child related to Dungeons and Dragons? All right, we can go there.
Tasha.
Tasha.
Bahamut.
I like Tasha.
Tasha's a good
nice
name.
Okay.
Wait, no, hang on. Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely like Drist.
Drist.
Definitely never
the answer's
name
the
it.
same no matter what. It's Drist. Yeah. All right. Goodbye, everyone.
G